So, hello everyone. Welcome back to Pocket Perspectives podcast. I am your host, Tanisha, as always, and we're joined with Jack.
Hello.
And me and Jack like to bring on guests whenever our knowledge on a certain subject or a matter is quite limited. Of course, you do our own research, but there's not unlike being informed on a certain topic by an expert or someone with a bit more lived experience in that area. So when we were looking at our Spotify analytics, we actually found that 8% of our listeners are actually American, which I know it's not like a huge percentage, but we're a British company. We live in Britain. We talk about British finances, that was quite surprising to us. So it made us think there probably are some differences between finances and how people manage the money in the UK compared to America. So why not get an American person to educate us? So welcome, Gannon Daynes. We actually met Gannon on YouTube, and he's a content creator. And me and Jack both absolutely fell in love with his content, so we thought let's get him on the podcast. And thankfully, you agreed. So hi, Gannon.
Hey, how are you?
Yeah, absolutely lovely. Thank you very much. Really excited for this episode, and I think it's going to be a good one. I was wondering if you would mind introducing yourself a little bit about what you do, how you started in that, and why you started making content, really.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I'm born and raised American. Funny enough, I'm actually a Canadian citizen as well. So dual citizen. My dad's from Canada, but honestly, I've lived in California my entire life up until about a year ago. And now I'm what we call a snowbird over here. So I spend the winters in Florida where it's very, very warm year round. And then the summers in New Jersey where it's picture perfect. So in terms of a profession, it's been an interesting 10 years since I graduated from college or uni. 10 years ago, I went to college, played tennis there, and then since there, I've been bumping around a bit and then kind of found my stride in the headhunting industry, the recruiting industry. So recruit for a lot of lawyers, attorneys, previously software engineers. The tech market has been a little challenging in recent years due to the rates increasing over here. And then during that whole time, I've kind of been on my personal finance journey and gotten a little bit addicted to it, to say the least, for better or worse. And it's been from a negative 100,000 in student loan debt between my fiance and I. We don't get college paid for over here, which I believe you guys do. So we start a little bit behind the curve. Unfortunately, been able to grow that to over 700,000 US, of course, over the last about 10 years or so.
Amazing.
Wow.
That, yeah, I absolutely love that. And when you started, obviously on this journey, was that like your kind of journey? Did you want to inspire other people, and that is that why you started making YouTube content, would you say?
Absolutely. I mean, personal finance is, I mean, the pinnacle at the end of the day. I mean, we all show up, we go to work every day, we make money, and eventually the goal at some point is to not have to show up at 9 a.m. and commute every day and go to work. So definitely have a big passion behind it. I have a lot of people that I manage, and I've helped them make a significant income, and it's very interesting to see the different ways that people spend money out there, to say the least. So um,
Yeah.
between some of the learnings from some of the interesting decisions of some of my team members, I was like, people just don't understand like finance 101. So I'm just going to start making videos, talk about my journey, talk about what I've learned along the way, and what's worked for me. Because fortunately, I'm in a position now where um, I'm doing well, I'll say. So
Yeah. Well, it's great to hear. We absolutely love that. And it is definitely really inspiring. So yeah, it's nice that you do share it. When we started this podcast, so our first initial thought was we're very British, we're quite prudish, we don't like to talk about any sensitive topics, and money, especially here, is a sensitive subject. So when you've been making content, what's the kind of the reception been? Are people in America the same as us in terms of like don't really want to talk about it, or is it more open there?
it's very similar culture. I think the
Hmm.
younger generation is becoming more open to it. And it's interesting because, I mean, I actually spoke to a viewer yesterday. He was asking me about his situation and what he should do.
Hmm.
And the reason that he's gravitated to my content specifically is because I'm just so open about my situation. I mean, I talk about my income, I talk about where my net worth's at, and a lot of people are afraid to talk about it because it's kind of taboo. And I
Hmm.
mean, to some people, they see it as, well, it's a spotlight on their missed opportunities or their failures, and that's rude to bring those things up. But to others, it's nice to know where someone is, and you can have deep conversations to see how everyone can improve and learn from each other. So on face
Hmm.
value, the country as a whole typically doesn't like to talk about it, but I'm trying to change that to some extent and just be open about it. Fortunately, didn't always used to be that way. When I first got out of school, and I was actually living in a garden shed, believe it or not, trying to do a startup,
Wow.
which was a bit of a journey, and would eat at Taco Bell every morning, and
Yeah.
broke as can be. So at that time, I didn't really talk with my friends all that much in terms of
Yeah.
finances, because it's a lot easier to talk about it when you're doing well versus when you're not doing well. So it's definitely a subject that you need to kind of approach delicately.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's the same here, isn't it? See, like the younger people are starting to talk about it a lot more. I think it's just becoming more obvious for people to
Yeah.
just discuss things, just anything, not just finance, but like mental health, all that kind of thing. I think people are talking about it more now.
Yeah. It's positive change, go in the right direction,
Mm,
definitely.
yeah. Um, you mentioned that you're quite open and that you talk quite a lot about your journey from the minus $100,000 in debt to over 700,000. So I just wondered if you could sort of share your story in terms of how you managed to do that and the strategies that you used to sort of overcome that debt that you were in. Obviously, it's probably a huge story, so
So yeah, so if we look back over my last 10 years, so I just turned 30 a couple of months ago, so getting a few more gray hairs to say the least. But graduate college around 2021 range. Those first 5 years, they were bumpy. I was early on in my career. I had the philosophy of, I have very low overhead on a monthly basis. I've got to take some risk, and see if I can leapfrog a couple of the financial steps. So
Hmm.
those first 5 years, first one was a startup, actually. It was We raised a couple $100,000 of seed money. It was a immersive backpack for music festivals. So you go to some sort of EDM festival, your backpack connects and vibrates with the music on stage with the bass. So it kind of
right.
creates like a
Wow.
4D experience, to say the least. And that was a cool year and a half, 2-year journey. That's when I was living in the garden shed. We were making no money. We raised a few 100,000. We got it into production. We did a Kickstarter. Went 3x over goal. Everything was great. We actually had a meeting with Walmart. Do you guys have Walmart over there?
No, we don't.
No.
I think it's
Okay.
like Asda, isn't it? Is it like the same company?
I think they're
Asda
owned,
and
yeah.
Walmart.
So we've got something
Yeah.
similar. Yeah.
Okay, so it's basically the biggest retailer. They sell anything ever under the sun. Typically, very cheap product in comparison. So
Hmm.
we actually had a meeting with them, and they were interested in kind of doing a pilot of our product. The only problem is we were selling it for 300,000, or that's sorry, $300, and they needed to drop it to $100, and they would try it
Wow.
out,
Oh
which
well.
was a bit of a back and forth between me and my co-founder, and we
Hmm.
decided to not go that route because we wanted the higher quality product. Fast forward to the end of the journey, and we couldn't sell enough because we're selling to people that are in their early 20s, late teens, and their priority is to get the music festival ticket in comparison to actually buying all the other things. So
Hmm.
didn't work out. Had to close up shop. Had basically no money to my name at that point. Went into medical device sales, which is a very lucrative industry over here because our healthcare industry is exploitive. I don't know. It's probably the best way to say it. So I was in that journey for about a little over a year. I was doing well in it. At the age of 22, I was making, I think, about 170, 180,000, which was absolutely incredible. But I was
Mm,
driving around Los Angeles in a car for 10 plus hours a day. I didn't feel great about it from an ethical standpoint, to say the least.
Hmm.
So ended up leaving that to take another risk, believe it or not. I was 22, 23 range. Um, I went into day trading full time, which obviously got a lot of media coverage in 2020 with the GameStop and all of that fun stuff. So I was before that time. I did it for about a year and a half, or about a year solo. And at this point, I had about $30,000 in net worth, give or take. Well, I had 15,000 in student loans at the time, 30,000 cash, so 15,000, call it. I was
Mhm.
living at home with my parents, so overhead was extremely low at this point. And I was day trading full time, did it for about a year, did well ish. It's all relative, but made about 60,000. I ended up moving to Florida to work for a New York City firm at their satellite office, and got all my certifications, did all the fun stuff, and just decided that the emotional volatility, talking about mental health, was draining, to say the least. Where you make
Yeah.
30 grand in a month and then you lose 20 grand the next month, so you're netting 10 over a 2-month time horizon. So ended up leaving that, just couldn't handle it. And my girlfriend at the time, now fiance, she's actually English, but she was in school in Glasgow. She's English, but she moved to the States. She's a U.S. citizen, so
Mhm.
she went to school, University of Glasgow. Didn't get her tuition paid for because she was technically a U.S. resident.
Oh
So
no.
she was accumulating some definite student debt in order to become a veterinarian, which is what she is now. So I kind of was at a crossroads where I was like, okay, do I take another risk? I've got maybe 20 grand in my name at this point, or do we have a little bit over $100,000 in student loans sitting there and I'm making no money and she's about to graduate? So I had to go back into the sales world. It was honestly the best decision I could have made. So those are about the first 5 years, and that's where I talk about the choppy part of the journey, to say the least. And this whole time,
Mhm.
I was definitely very focused on personal finance, and
Mhm.
kept my overhead very low, considering the income that I made during that time was on average not enough, honestly, over those 5 years. So um, I moved back to Los Angeles, back to California. I was in Florida for about 3 months. And then I finally started making steady, consistent money. And that's kind of been the journey for the last 5 years. My income has gone from, I think, year one in the industry, which I'm fortunate enough to do well, was about 175,000. That went to about 250-ish in year two. Year three, which was the great resignation, and everybody was moving jobs and everybody was remote, and it felt like you could get a million people hired in a year. That was a great year. That was my first year managing as well. That was my PR year of 550,000, which is just bonkers.
Wow.
um, and then on the backside of that, which was last year, was about 470. And then we'll see what happens this year. The
Fingers
TBD. That's
crossed.
the sales industry is very volatile, to say the least. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
during that whole time was putting a large amount of money on the student loans to get those out of the way as quickly as possible, really
Mhm.
diving into all of the accounts and tax advantages accounts that we have over here in the US that the government set up for retirement: 401k, Roth IRA, health savings account, which I can dive into all those if you're interested. But really educated myself on all those, started utilizing them, and started stacking some serious chips at that point. So here we are.
Wow, it sounds very varied, doesn't it?
Yeah.
A
Yeah.
lot of different things. You mentioned that you've said all these different situations that you've been in earning different amounts of money at different times. So during while you're doing all these things, do you have sort of like different budgeting techniques that you use? 'Cause say you might have a period of time where you're not earning as much as you were before. So do you sort of balance things out in that way, or have a way of sort of
Definitely.
ensuring that that doesn't happen?
Yeah. So, I mean, my goal is always to spend as little money as possible, but obviously it's relative based on the income you're making. And it's a big balance between enjoying your life now versus when you're 65 and maybe can't walk as well.
Mm.
So early on, I mean, my initial budgeting technique was just like eat at Taco Bell every morning, which was $1.08 for a breakfast crunch wrap. I would go to Chipotle, which was I think $8 a day, because I would get a burrito, cut it in half, and that would be lunch and dinner. And then I lived in a garden shed for free. So those are some extreme measures early on. During this whole time, in terms of tracking, I always ran an income statement and a balance sheet. So at the end of every month, and I've been doing this for just about the whole 10 years, I'll go into my credit card statement. I'll write out every single line item in terms of what I spent on the previous month. I
Mhm.
personally don't use too many apps. I think for a lot of people, they're really beneficial. But for me, I like to write in that I spent $82 on cheese and wine last month, and I probably shouldn't do that next month. I just have a little bit more of an emotional attachment, to
Yeah.
say the least, and I like to feel the pain a little bit more. So, yeah, every month though, I would track my spend in the spreadsheet, dating back 10 years. And then depending on my spend, and then my girlfriend comes back from Scotland and probably can't live in a garden shed anymore. It wasn't enough space for two people. So our overhead over the years has increased to a point where, I mean, quite frankly, it's uncomfortable at times, but if you compare it
Mhm.
to the percentage of savings rate, and kind of how much we can actually afford,
Mhm.
it's not that bad. So it's been anywhere from, on the low end, I mean, I was living in a garden shed, living with my parents, that was less than $1,000 a month. The year when I started in recruiting, it probably went up to about 2,000. And then quite frankly, it's doubled the last few years, from 2,000 to 4,000 to 8,000, which is crazy to me. 100,000 spent in a years seems a
Yeah.
little
Mm.
excessive, but I guess such is life. So yeah.
Yeah. You just gotta do what you gotta do, haven't you? I absolutely
Yeah.
love that journey, to be fair. And I think me and Jack have spoken on previous episodes about our journey and especially like our career. I mean, we're only like 25, 26. But we've still in that time since university had ebbs and flows, and like Jack would admit more than me. How do you personally find that motivation when sometimes life throws a bit of a curveball at you and you're like, oh my God, right, I've got to get back up again. How do you find that within yourself to keep going?
I think it just starts with, and we talk about this a lot in my work as well, but like, what's your why? Like, why are you trying to get to this end goal of whatever it may be? So for some, it's, I want to buy a house, or I want to buy a flat in the city, or I want to have kids and be able to provide them with a life that I haven't been able to have for myself. So, I mean, my why is, I mean, quite frankly, I want to be at a point from a financial independence where I can say that I don't need to go to work every day, and I choose to go to work. So that's kind of my beacon of light. So during those times that are difficult, and I mean, I have a volatile income where things go up and down, and I mean, sometimes expenses come up and they're really painful, especially when you need to update your spreadsheet at the end of the month, and you go down in net worth instead of up. It's definitely very difficult.
Yeah.
So for me, it's having the beacon of light at the end of the tunnel where things are hard now, but they will get better. And I think as we mature and have more life experiences, I heard a quote the other day, and life's never going to get easier. We just learn how to handle hard better.
Hmm.
So going through these painful
Mm.
times is good. Not in the moment, it doesn't feel like it, but on the other side of it, when you're there again, you're like, okay, I've been here. It's going to be okay. Let me just, for me, I'm extremely analytical. I write everything down. Like I probably have an existential crisis, which maybe we all do and don't admit it, once every month or 3 months or so.
Yeah.
And I write down just all of my thoughts and like revisit the goals, and then I bring it to my fiance, and she's like, "We talked about this 2 months ago. Why are we talking about it again?" But for me, I just need to write it down, and just say it out loud, and just remember the why of where we're going.
Yeah, I love that. It's good that you're so perceptive about it though, and you acknowledge that. 'Cause I think a lot of people just kind of
Mm.
put the blinkers on and just put the head in the sand. So I really like that. Yeah.
Yeah, and it comes back to the talking about it again as well, doesn't it? Like when if you are having those feelings where life's a bit up and down, like you said, you've got those curveballs being thrown at you, just talking about it, someone else might have had that life experience already that they can share with you and how they dealt with it, whereas then you don't have to deal with it on your own. So it's nice that
100%.
you can do that, that you can write it all down and talk about it with your fiance, and
Yeah.
it's good.
Yeah.
She's very
Love
patient
it.
with me, to say the least.
Yeah.
So.
I love that. So I thought I would interject and put a little bit of a game out there. So something a little bit fun. I'm going to bring up a series of things, like just kind of everyday things that we all kind of use. And I'd love if both of you would take it in turns and saying how much you would spend on this particular item. So the aim is I'm just curious to see the price difference between here in
Mm.
America. So I went to Las Vegas 2 years ago now, and I did notice a bit of a difference in just kind of regular things that I was buying, but we were also on the strip, so I don't know if that was just heightened
Yeah.
because of that. So yeah, I'm just very intrigued. Um, so we'll start, and if Jack, you want to go first, and then Gannon
Yeah.
can follow, and then we can feel free to provide any context to this. I understand some of this is kind of can be a bit varied depending on what kind of products you do. So just a bit of a general one would be absolutely fine.
One thing
Um,
I do want to interject, if that's all right. We got to
yeah,
do our best to talk between pounds versus US as well. So
yeah,
we'll do our best to convert on a 20 to
that's very
25%.
true.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, because the current exchange rate, I've just noted this down. So
Yeah.
£1 right now is $1.27.
Okay.
So that's in American, and then so
25,
one,
30% more. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So that's just to acknowledge that definitely.
Mhm.
So I've put here, and I know in the UK it can be very, very varied depending on what city you live in, and I assume it'll be the same with America and what state you live in. But
Mhm.
a rent for a three-bedroom house, say like city centre, what would you pay on that, Jack?
Rent for like in dead in the city centre.
Yeah, so obviously you got London in the UK, which is just
Yeah.
astronomical, and we can just forget about that. So
Yeah.
me and Jack
The
both
same
live
in
in the
New
north.
York over here. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it's just like you can't even
Okay.
talk about that. So yeah, say North, North England
Maybe like £1,250.
a month. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's not
Oh
bad.
man. Um, in California, easily 4,000, and that's for like
Wow.
not that attractive.
Oh my.
We had a 4 bedroom in California that was 4,300. In Florida, which is supposed to be cheaper, we paid 4,300 for a 3 bedroom condo. That was seasonal. If we did that year round, it'd probably be 3,400. So
Wow.
yeah.
The
I
houses are
always.
much bigger there though as well in America, I
Yeah.
think.
Mhm.
Like the
So I
room
don't know.
Yeah.
sizes and things.
Yeah.
So I mean, the one in California was a 2,300 square feet. For reference, I don't know how that compares to you, but
Yeah, I have no clue.
I don't
And
know.
but
I
definitely
don't
when I
know
see them
actually. Yeah.
on like shows and stuff, I just feel like American houses are just so much bigger than the UK.
I was just gonna say I always see on TikTok like Texas is quite a cheap. Like they always show like big houses and say that this many $1,000, and I think wow that's really cheap compared to here. Is that true or is it?
I mean, when you get into the center of any city, obviously it's pretty
Yeah.
standard relatively. I mean, California, New York
Yeah.
are extremes.
Hmm.
One thing that's really interesting is you look at something like that in Texas, and although the price point is lower than say something in California, our property tax varies based on the state that you're in. So
Mm.
Texas has
Right.
something, they're one of the highest in the US because over here in the US, each state also has different income tax. So there's a couple of states out there that don't have any state income tax. So Texas is one of those, Florida is one of those, California is the opposite, where you can pay all the way up to 13%, which is on top of your federal and
Wow.
everything else. So like when I was living in California, single, making that kind of money, I paid about 42% in income tax, which is painful. So, and
Jeez.
we get nothing in return for that compared to like over there, you get university for free, healthcare for free. There's a lot of things where over here we still get to pay for all those things. So, and to
Wow.
answer your question though, when it comes to Texas, they have the mortgage payment on a lower priced house will be similar to the mortgage payment all in on say something in California if it's a good chunk higher kind of a thing. So
Hmm.
at face value, it
Right.
looks great, but when you get into the actual weeds, there is actually some differences.
Yeah.
Wow, that's really interesting. Do you think that a bit of a tangent here, but do you think the salary is kind of proportionate to obviously if things are a bit more expensive, which we can go through today. But do you think because I see jobs like for example, my partner, he's in tech, so he's a software developer, and he says like all the time, if I was doing this job in the States, I'd be on like so much more money. So do you think
Mhm.
that balances it out a little bit or still not?
I would say definitely, yeah. I mean,
Okay.
and it varies from state to state. COVID kind of changed the game a little bit because you could have San Francisco tech startup companies hire people, and I mean, it's all relative to you, but somewhere like
Hmm.
Kansas or Arkansas, which is a significantly lower overhead, but they could still get the same money as they would in San Francisco. So it's changed the game a little bit, but I would say US as a whole, I'm assuming it's significantly more expensive than it is, say, over in the UK.
Yeah.
And I think that the salaries would definitely represent that. So like average
Okay.
household income over here or average individual income, that's average across every industry is about 60,000 a year. So
Wow.
in comparison, I don't know
A
what
lot
it is
higher.
over there.
I think it's
Yeah.
about 30 in the UK.
Mhm.
So yeah, that's definitely a massive change. Um, So a fun one. I'm really intrigued with this one. A loaf of bread. How much would you spend on a typical loaf of bread?
The bread I get is £2. I like sourdough, like the nice big sourdough loaves of bread.
Yeah.
Do you get that from like a shop, like a grocery shop, or is it?
Yeah, just from like a supermarket, we can get it, or you can go to a bakery if you want to be bougie. But I just
Okay.
go to a supermarket.
Yeah. Over here for just like a standard loaf of like wheat or white, probably $3, maybe $4, somewhere in that range. For sourdough, I mean, yeah, if you want to go bougie and you want to go to the nice cafe, I mean, it's like $15 or something.
Wow.
Sourdough is probably
bread.
around. Yeah, it's good though. It's good. Trust me.
I hope so.
Yeah. But if you could buy it at a supermarket for a loaf of sourdough, I mean, I don't know, probably $6, I would say at least for like a good loaf.
Wow.
Does it go off quick as well? Like, is the date short on it?
For something like a sourdough, yeah, because normally they don't have all the preservatives, and it's
Yeah.
more in like the bakery section than just like aisle 12 kind of a thing where you get just a
Yeah.
standard loaf. So yeah.
Yeah.
Wow, that's really interesting.
That's
I do
nice.
see a lot of I mean, this is me literally just pulling from shows and movies, but like Trader Joe's apparently is like it's a bit of a
Oh,
health store, but it's so expensive apparently.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's nice. You pay for the convenience because you just get frozen meals, and it's one
Yeah.
of the things they don't warn you about being an adult is you got to make dinner every night, and it's tough.
Yeah.
No, it's hard work, isn't it? So I'm also intrigued about this one. So McDonald's, how much would you pay for just kind of a standard meal, let's say a Big Mac, for example?
I feel like every time I go to McDonald's, sorry, Jackie, you're supposed to be going first on this one. I can fire
No,
away.
all right.
Yep, $15
Yeah, fair enough.
probably. Easily, I'm out the door for 15.
50.
Yeah. Every time you go to fast food now,
Wow.
it's easily $15. Yeah.
That's like a
Wow.
nice burger restaurant, isn't it? Here, like it's like a nice
Here,
sit
yeah.
down, like full-on meal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Probably about £6-7 for a Big Mac meal,
Yeah, I think it's around
like a
6
large
now.
meal as well.
Yeah.
Yep.
Wow,
So
that's crazy difference.
fast food is becoming
Mm.
less worth it. I mean, you get it from a fast
Mm.
food standpoint, but I mean, yeah, we get a burger with fries here at a restaurant. I mean, that's $16 to $18 is standard. No drink with that. If you get a drink, maybe 20. So for another
Mhm.
$5, you can actually get something that's good.
Yeah,
But you know, it serves its place from time to time, getting some fast food.
definitely. Plus, we have a really bad habit of using like Uber Eats and Deliveroo, so obviously there's a extra charge with that. So when you're ordering it online, it's just completely different as well.
Yep.
Mm.
Yeah.
Crazy money.
It's a slippery slope
Um,
with Uber
how-
Eats.
oh yeah, dangerous, very dangerous. So Gannon, how much would you spend on a cinema ticket or a movie ticket?
12 to 15 for just the ticket. Yeah.
Okay, what about you, Jack? Depends where
You
you
know what,
go,
I don't
doesn't it?
actually-
Here.
Yeah, I don't actually go to the cinema much, but there's like, so like Cineworld, I could get a ticket for £5 from Cineworld.
In
But
what
then-
planet are you on?
Well, I think because I've got student discount, it's
Oh,
£5.
okay.
But
Okay.
then like Odeon's like £12-15, I think, when I've been. But it's been ages since I've been to a cinema.
Yeah. Yeah, the Cineworld by me is about 15 per ticket. But we do have a View, which is £5. Massively. Yeah, I
Yeah,
know
I'm
the
thinking
Cineworld
View.
has gone up. It's crazy. Like it's just not worth it anymore. Like we just do it at home.
That's crazy. So it's technically more expensive when you do the conversion to get a ticket over there, which is super interesting.
Yeah, I think it used to be a lot cheaper, but then I think since COVID, it's just because no one's going. I think so. They've had to keep afloat. They just had to hype the prices up, which is unfortunate. So what about a standard cup of coffee, like just going out like a Starbucks or from a cafe?
I'll go $5 probably. No, probably 5 to
Fine.
6.
Yeah, it's probably about like £4 for a coffee, £4 or
Yeah.
£5, depending on what you get. At Starbucks, you can rack up the bill quite quickly with the
Yeah.
things that you add in it, like all these shots and the extra shots of espresso and the syrups and all
Change the
that you can
milk
put in
and
it.
stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I expected them to be quite similar, to be fair.
Yeah.
So this one, and again, I want to preface this because I know we do have the NHS, but Jack, I thought you'd be able to touch on experience because I know you have gone private for a few things. A doctor's visit, so just a standard, just going to see the GP.
Yeah. Well, I've had one visit, like an initial consultation with a private consultant, and that was £165 just to sort of just go and sit and talk to them and introduce myself to them.
Yeah.
I don't know how that compares to.
And is that without any insurance coverage? Like that's strictly out of pocket kind of a thing?
Yeah, yeah.
Hmm. So over here, I mean, we have insurance. So if I go see a doctor, I mean, it's all that we pay as the individual is like what our deductible is up until
Hmm.
that's it. I don't know if it's similar over there, but I mean, maybe $50, $75 max kind of a
Okay.
thing.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Mm.
So,
Yeah.
but we pay monthly on insurance premiums. So,
Right.
yeah,
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 that's true. So it definitely adds up there. And
yeah.
I suppose Jack, yours is like a specialist as well, so it's probably why they hyped it,
Yeah,
I assume.
I could have, like, if I was seeing them regularly, I could have like an insurance where I'd pay monthly, but it was just
Hmm.
like a one-off thing, so I just paid it all.
Yeah. No, definitely. That's something I'm very fortunate about is the healthcare. I've
Mm.
gotten down a rabbit hole on TikTok of American women like giving birth and like sharing the costs of like what it
Yeah.
costs to give birth, and
Crazy.
it's just but like people pay for skin on skin, and it just rocked my mind. I just couldn't even fathom it.
So yeah, I mean, just to shed a little bit more light on like what we actually pay from a premium standpoint. So like
Hmm.
if I was to go get health insurance through my employer and I had a wife on it and one kid and 10 kids is all the same, but that's easily $800 a month just in premium that we're spending to cover that.
Oh
Um,
wow.
yeah, so it's significant. I probably pay all in for everything about 200 a month, and I'm on a high deductible plan. So with a higher deductible, I'm responsible for more of it. So I spend about 200 a month. If I was on a lower one, just for me and my fiance, it'd probably be at least 300, if not 400 a month. So yeah, we gotta. It's a good chunk of change when you're making 60,000 and you gotta spend $6,000 to $10,000 a year. It's a good chunk of your
Mm.
budget that just goes to the premium. It's tough. Yeah.
100%. That's literally my rent payment. Like we
Yeah.
our rent's like just over 700 combined a month, so that is absolutely wild. And then the last one, and again, this can be like just on personal preference, but I'm just intrigued. How much would you spend on like a first date? So you're taking someone out, say for a dinner. Like what would be your like budget, do you think?
Me today versus me 8 years
Yeah,
ago.
that's true.
Yeah, taking the Taco Bell for $1. Yeah, maybe get a Mountain Dew. No, but me today, I mean, probably $100 would be reasonable for a nice dinner or something.
Okay,
On
yeah.
a first date.
You know,
Oh,
all
Jack's not
relative.
treating
Yeah.
us, guys.
I don't know. I would probably spend like, if I was going above £50, I'd start sweating. I'd be like, oh my god, this is going high.
Yeah. No,
But
I
yeah,
think about 50 would be, yeah, if I was treating someone.
yeah.
But again, just the prices, and that's very interesting. Are there any others that I haven't mentioned that you guys would think would be interesting to compare before we
Maybe
move
like
on?
a utility, like like gas bills and things like that. Just like utility bills is interesting.
So, and I don't know if you guys have to pay for all the same things that we do. We pay for electricity, water, gas if you have it, and then trash as well. So all of those, I mean, 300 to 500 probably a month would be reasonable.
Wow.
Right.
What do you do, Jack?
Well, we don't pay for. I mean, we don't. I think it depends on the town and city whether you pay for your rubbish. I think like sometimes like garden waste you have to pay for
Yeah, I
it.
think we get it included because of our taxes. We get it all included, but normally, yeah, garden waste, most people have to add it on.
Mm. But then like water, gas, and electric is probably about £80 for us at the minute. There's just two of us living here.
Yeah, for all of it combined.
But, yeah,
That is a
that's
stark
crazy, isn't
difference.
it?
But yeah, again, the salaries are bigger, so you kind of have
Mm.
to account for that. That's
And
really
then one more I'm
interesting.
curious about, and it might be hard because I know we measure it differently, but gas is always an interesting one because I think your guys' gas or petrol is
Oh
higher.
yeah.
Uh,
So Yeah, that's something that my
Okay.
fiance talks about. So, I mean, I don't know how we're gonna be able to account for this, but I mean, California, it's crazy expensive. It's like $6 a gallon. In Florida, it's about half of that, so about $3 a gallon. But you guys go based
Right.
on liters, I believe
On
it is.
liters, I think it's like 3.7 liters in a gallon.
Okay.
I think,
I
yeah.
think it's like
What do you check?
£1. It's like £1.40 at the minute per litre of petrol, but then diesel is like £1.60, something like
Okay.
that.
So maybe about $4 to $5 a gallon, maybe somewhere in there.
Yeah,
Mm.
Not
essentially.
a math wizard, but
Yeah.
yeah.
No, during COVID though, our petrol prices like plummeted, so it was really cheap
Oh,
to
Yeah.
Jack. It was like
that's
under £1. Everyone was
the
buzzing.
best. Yeah.
Mm.
Drove a lot then, and there was nobody on the road. So, like Los Angeles, it might be not as bad as London in terms of traffic, but Los Angeles traffic is notoriously terrible. And during peak COVID, I was living there, and I mean, we could drive from where I live to like the Staples Center, where that's like the hub, in like 12 minutes. Where any other time of year, non-COVID, that was easily a 45-minute drive. So, and
Really?
gas was like almost
Right.
free at that point, so it was fun to
Yeah.
drive around for sure.
Wow. You know, when I went to Vegas, we did a road trip to LA, and yeah, I know what you mean about the traffic. Like most
Yeah,
of the time in that car was just in traffic. Like I won't
yeah,
lie. Yeah.
miserable.
So we touched earlier just on like budgeting tips, the budgeting techniques that you've used, but I feel like it would be interesting to see if there are any different types of budgeting sort of practices that you would use in America versus here. So I'll just talk about a couple that I know of. So one that quite a lot of people do is the 50-30-20 rule. So they say that 50% of your income goes to your needs, like your utility bills, your food, your rent, that sort of thing. 30% goes on the things that you want to do, like your entertainment and eating nice meals, that sort of thing. And then 20% on paying off debts and saving money. So I just wondered if you had something, if that exact same thing, or if you do anything a little bit like that over there, or.
Yeah, very similar over here for that. I mean, we focus on the average American, very similar over here. So if the average household, just to kind of break it down to see, and this is why people are living paycheck to paycheck, which I mean, it's just under 50% of Americans that make over 100,000, which isn't a crazy pool, live paycheck to
Mm.
paycheck despite making that much money. So I
Wow.
mean, if you're to kind of break it down to understand the numbers, I mean, make 100,000. If you live in a state like Texas with no state income tax, you're probably around 20% in taxes, which puts you at about $80,000, which is just under 7,000 a month. So if we break it down, then you've got 3,500 goes to your needs. So if we look at that, which is 50%, so 3,500 rent, utility. I mean, car payments are crazy. I don't know how much you guys have in terms of car payments. The average car payment over here is like $700 or something insane.
Wow.
Yeah,
Oof,
it's a
mine's
bit of a problem.
£42.
Yeah, and that's not even including insurance, So, um,
Yeah.
so I mean, to go down from there, I mean, that's why no one's honestly, or a small percentage of Americans are able to save for retirement. And I mean, 3,500 on all those things, 20% or 30% you said of about 7,000 is what 2,100 goes to food and going out and all these other things. So, yeah, we the majority of people try to adhere to those things, but it's easier said than done when
Yeah.
everything has gone up so much. And that's why, honestly, there's such a retirement crisis and an affordability crisis with what we have over here. For me, myself, just because, I mean, if you look at my income, which is an extreme income of 500,000, I live in a state with no state income tax, which is 25% taxes that I pay. So my take home is 375, which is bonkers. It's about $30,000 a month. When our spend's about 8,000, we have a pretty decent spread. So for me, it's less about focusing on that because from a relative, it would be extreme to spend that much, to say the least. So for me, I just try to stick to a budget of, I mean, depending on basically what our rent is at the time. So for me, I write down the budget, and I mean, granted, there's a little bit of flexibility in it, but I try to save as much as possible and invest as much as possible because I have that why at the end of the day where I want to get out of the game.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. It all comes back to it, doesn't it?
Yep, that was a bit of a workaround to your answer, but I think we got there. So, yeah.
No, I feel like it's obviously I say it's what one thing that some people do here, but like you said, it's a lot of people can't necessarily afford to only have 50% of their income go on bills and things. Because I mean, for me personally, a lot more than 50% of my income pays for my bills.
Yeah.
So I haven't got that 50% left over at the end to be playing around with. Another one that I quite like is an envelope system. So I've seen it all over TikTok. I don't know if it's something that they do in America as well, but basically instead of keeping all your money in a bank account and using it that way, people take all their money out as cash, and they have like different envelopes for like rent, for food, and they budget their cash exactly in the envelopes like that and spend like that.
They definitely do that over here. I would say it's a very small percentage that actually take that step. And
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's interesting because I mean, something like that, you need to have some sort of financial awareness and financial literacy, and that less than 50% of Americans have a degree of financial literacy based on like one of the federal institutions did a survey and everything. So it's a very good strategy, and I'm definitely a big fan of it for the person that has a hard time staying disciplined with their spending, which is probably the majority versus the minority. I think a lot of it comes down to who you are and like how you like have an emotional attachment to your money. So like for me with cash, once I take cash out of my bank account and I spend it, like it's out of sight, out of mind. I don't see it on my spreadsheet at the end of the month. I have to remember what I spent money on. So for me, I have an emotional attachment to my credit card statement. Other people make it feel a lot more real by taking out the cash and actually spending it versus just tapping the card and not even thinking about it. And your guys' tap system over there for paying credit cards is like 0.2 seconds. So it's like this, where over here it takes a little bit longer. So I think it all comes down to the person and where they have that emotional attachment and where it's harder for them to part ways with the money.
And do you feel like in terms of budgeting in general, a lot of people over here like to use systems like IE Hub to do like online budgets where they can just keep track of everything online? I know you said you like to write everything down and do it that way instead of using like the apps, but what do you think is the most common thing over there for people to do? Is it more the online or the on paper system?
Definitely the apps. It's way easier. I mean, I spend time on it every single month, and that's why I think a lot of the apps out there are great. I think the biggest thing that's important for people is when they set their budget and they spend the time on it, there's obviously a lot of emotional excitement, and I'm gonna do this, and it's one thing to set a goal and follow it, it's another thing to do it consistently. So fortunately with the apps, it pulls in from your credit card automatically, but I think some people struggle to keep up to date with it and update it, and you've got to move certain things to different categories and stuff, so then it's kind of out of sight, out of mind. But I would say the majority use the apps. I would say probably less than 1% actually pull up a spreadsheet and pull up their credit card statement and write everything down.
Right, okay, it's interesting. So the plan was to do like a 40-minute episode for a 1-week thing with Gannon, but it's actually been amazing. We're talking about so much and it's been really interesting. So we thought we would split the episode in two. So this episode ends here, and then next week we're going to continue talking about all things finance, differences between America, UK, and it's going to be really, really interesting. So yeah, speak to you next week. Thank you very much, guys. And as usual, any questions you've got for us, it's all in our social media, which is just IE Hub if you search that for Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. And yeah, thank you so much for listening, guys, and we'll catch up next week. Bye.